Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Life Talks. Today I have Matt Izzo. I have his Twitter open right now, and his profile says, "My life used to suck, but now it's awesome. I did it by fixing my mind and my body. I'll teach you how to do it too." Matt, thank you for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here. Happy to talk to you.
Yeah, right off the bat, I want to share a screen here, just because your before and after picture is worth sharing. Uh, if you can see it on your end,
Yeah.
this is your before picture, and this is you after.
Yeah.
So maybe if you could talk about a little bit of this journey I see you have here, my first 35 years, fat, weak, asthmatic, unathletic. Just speak about, your journey. I think I was reading in an article that you have on your link tree that you were at 250 pounds. So maybe if
Yeah.
you could just share your journey a little bit for people who don't know you.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm someone I gained weight as a kid. I was probably, I don't know, 8, 10 years old, maybe, right? And I started to get a little pudgy, and then I was kind of fat for my whole life, up until recently. But I did have three separate occasions where I've lost about 75 pounds. It didn't stick the first two times. So it happened. I did it once in high school, right? And I didn't know what I was doing back in the 90s. It wasn't like it was today. It was a lot harder to get this information, right? You couldn't just hire a coach off Twitter or, watch YouTube videos and stuff like that. So I did it by running in place in my bedroom and watching old sitcom reruns. And I would do sit-ups in my room until my back was bleeding, right? Because I thought that was how you got abs.
Yeah.
And it worked eventually somehow. I don't really even know how it worked, but it did. And I got skinny, but sure enough, it didn't stick. And I ended up gaining the weight back again pretty quickly. Went to college, was kind of fat the whole time. And then again in my mid-20s, I started to really research and learn about how this worked. I found the website. It was called John Stone Fitness. There was this guy named John Stone, and just to show you how long ago this was, his claim to fame was he had a digital camera in 2003, and he took a picture of himself every day, right? And back then that was crazy,
Yeah.
to think about that. But he took a progress photo of himself every day from when he was fat to like 90 days, and then he kept doing it for a long time. But you could see the transformation, right? You could see him losing weight from any picture one to the next one. There's really no difference. But when you look at the whole thing, you're like, wow, this is a totally crazy thing. And so I learned a lot about fitness and nutrition, exercising, weightlifting, all that stuff back then. I educated myself. I had a really successful weight loss. I was 25 years old, and I thought that, all right, I have all this knowledge now. Now I'm set for life, right? Now it's great. I'm not going to be fat anymore. I know what to do, right? Because the problem before was I didn't even know what to do. But now I know what to do, so I'll be set. Well, sure enough, I dealt with an injury, some emotional trauma, right? I started to gain the weight back again. I ended up getting fat again, and I was there for about another 8 years, into my mid 30s. And it was a real struggle for me. I knew what to do. I knew how to lose weight. I knew how to be fit, but it was a challenge to just kind of summon the energy to do it, right? And the motivation to do it, because losing a lot of weight is pretty grueling. And to just kind of be left with the idea that you're going to put in all this work and all this effort and it's not going to stick. Like who wants to do that? Who wants to go through 9 months of struggling with this only to have it not stick, and you're going to get fat again? So eventually I summoned the energy to do it, and I had a really successful weight loss. What I kind of told myself was, if I just keep doing what I'm doing when I lost the weight, right, tracking my food, tracking my exercise, weighing myself every day, I don't see how I can get fat again. Because even if the scale starts to go up, right, a couple pounds, well, it's a lot easier to lose 5 pounds than it is to lose 50 pounds. So that was what I committed myself to, and I did it, and I stuck with it. I lost the weight in 2017, Memorial Day weekend, coming up on 5 years now. And, from that point, I just kept going. And I kept lifting weights, I kept working out, I kept working on other parts of myself, like you said, mind, body, spirit, right? These things are all connected, and it's more than just losing weight and getting skinny and being able to fit into smaller clothing that you need to do. And for me, I needed to do a lot of work on emotions and my mental,
Yeah, maybe
side of
if you could dive
things.
into that, because I can relate
Yeah.
to that big time. I mean, for me, I had a vice of porn for a long time. I was stuck in
Hmm.
bad habits, and I would go through phases where I would just stop, be like, all right, good, I'm good. And same thing with the gym. When I first started going to the gym, it was like, all right, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna push myself, and I'm just gonna focus on that. But it wasn't it was just masking a problem. And it's not, and you can't really talk about this with a lot of people because they don't, it's in our culture too, it's very victim. Either you're in the
Hmm.
victim culture, so people will use their emotional trauma as like another mask. So maybe if you could talk about like how did you overcome your own trauma? What was the belief systems that you had, and what was your transformation going through that?
Yeah, sure. And it wasn't something I necessarily set out to do. I didn't one day wake up and be like, "Oh, I have a lot of suppressed trauma that I need to
Yeah,
overcome," right? And once I'm able to get past that and let it go, I'll be good. So that wasn't a thought that ever occurred to me, right? But it was just trying to get better. And I took a class in college. It was a BS one credit class my senior year. It was called stress management, and in that class, they taught us about meditation. So I had some experience meditating. I liked it a lot. I just never did it, right? And so even throughout my weight loss, I had I was like, I have to start meditating at some point. It took me a long time to get around to it, but I built a meditation practice. And doing that was really transformative for me, probably as transformative as the fat loss, right? So that transformed my body. The meditation transformed my mind. I did it every day for years and years and years. I've fallen off a little bit recently. I actually had a great meditation session this morning. So it's an extremely beneficial
yeah,
practice. But what it did was it gave me control over my mind and my focus. And then, so that really unlocked it for me, that I was now kind of able to level up even more, right? It's mind, body, you're starting to holistically move things in the right direction. So as I did that, I started to read a bit and research about, how does the mind work, right? I've always wanted to understand how my mind works and how the mind of other people works, right? Because if you can understand that, it's going to make your life a lot better, a lot easier in a lot of
yeah. And if you
ways.
know your own mind, you know other people's minds, because
Yeah.
although it's expressed differently, we're all deep down the same.
Sure. So I started researching, psychology, behavior science, all these sorts of things, evolutionary biology, right? So I started reading a lot about these things, researching these things. It led me kind of to spirituality and emotions, and that was where I kind of learned about emotions. I never really understood these things. When I was younger, I guess I would say I was in a chronically negative state. So I didn't necessarily even identify I was in a negative state, because that's just the state I was in all the
Yeah,
time, right? Like kind of how the fish that doesn't know it's in the water, because that's just the
yeah,
state it's in. So if you're depressed and anxious, or like I was, you might not even realize that, hey, there's a lot of levels above this. You can overcome this and get out of this. But I did that slowly through the exercise, the weight loss, the meditation, right? And then I started to research and learn about it. And then that's when I was really able to level up. Started journaling, which was tremendously helpful for me. I was able to write down, look at past trauma, see it from a different perspective, right? Even see the benefits that all these traumatic events from my youth, have had in developing me into the person I am. I talked with Courtney a lot about it, right? And she's helped me a lot, and just helping to see things from a different perspective, right? I would tell her about like a childhood thing that would happen to me in school, and it was something that I always carried, a lot of blame for, maybe, or something like that. And she would say, oh wow, that teacher was crazy, that's terrible, they shouldn't have treated you like that, right? But that just wasn't the perspective I ever saw it from. So working through a lot of these past things and these past emotions that I had suppressed, and I had carried them with me, and I was carrying them for years and years and years, and just learning how to let them go, and just see them from a different perspective, right? That was what really helped me kind of evolve my mind and my spirit and my emotions along with my body. So what we really started out as me just trying trying to lose some weight and fit into some clothes, right? Really became a more holistic transformation where I was able to kind of level up in all aspects of my life, because that was necessary to have the weight loss stick. And that's what the missing piece of this was for me all along. Was, it's ultimately down to your self-image. So the way you see yourself on a subconscious, on a deep level, that's going to be the way you behave. And you can overcome that with willpower for a time, right? You can buckle down, you can do a 12-week challenge, you can do 75 hard, right? You can do all these things. You can really focus yourself on that. But what happens when your willpower gives in? And eventually everyone's willpower gives in. You're hit with some emotional trauma, some adversity, an injury maybe, right? How do you see yourself on a deep level? And that's going to be the way that you start to behave. And if you still see yourself as that fat, depressed person, then when your willpower gives in, you're going to start to behave again like this fat, depressed person, right? This is why diets fail. It's because, right, you hear the cliche, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle change. It's because it's true, right? If you see yourself a certain way, and you're going to behave in that certain way once you kind of give up with the willpower, and that's going to be what's going to drive you back to the way that you were. So in order to make the transformation a permanent transformation, it involves evolving your entire being and changing the way you see yourself on a deep level.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, I often hear that, people, just because you lose the weight or you set that goal, you still have that mindset, those belief systems, if they're still there, they're going to still carry out. So, I say when you go to the gym, it's like to find that sweet spot of like always being hungry for more, but being at peace where you're at and having that self-love, which is really clarity on the way you see the world. Maybe if you can go into that a little bit, as far as, because meditation, prayer, these can be very heavy words for some people.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean for you? What does meditation entail for you? What is that? Is it a process of like, some people say praying to God, or, affirmations, and other people will say it's a process of surrender, and just letting go and just be. What does it mean for you, meditation, prayer?
Yeah, I mean, I was never a religious person growing up, and if you would have asked me as a teenager, I probably would have said I was an atheist, right? And then I would have evolved to agnostic. I have a very different view of the world now. I think God is a very charged word, right?
Yeah.
And it calls up in certain people certain things, right? And there's a personification of God that's really common among, I would say, Christian traditions. This old guy in the sky with a
Yeah.
beard, right? And when you think about that, you're like, well, that's absurd. That couldn't be there. Where's the proof? Where's the evidence? And so I've had to evolve my thinking, and I've come to understand that there is a higher intelligence that governs things, right? That's far beyond what my mind is capable of, what
Yeah.
your mind's capable of, what any human mind is capable of, right? If you just think about how your body is operating right now as we're having this conversation, right? All the trillions of cells undergoing all these functions, right? And this all works seamlessly, and this is happening, not just in you and in me, but in every living being on this, on this earth, and all the stuff throughout the universe, right? So there's obviously some sort of higher intelligence that's governing this. So what I came to understand is my mind is good for certain things, right? It's an analytical tool that we have as humans, right? You can look at it though, like like a tool, like a hammer, right? When you want to use the hammer, when you want to hit a nail into the wall, you pick the hammer up, you put the nail in the wall, and you put it down. Well, a lot of people don't do that with their minds, right? They don't use their minds as a tool because they are identified with their minds. Their mind has tricked them into thinking that they are their mind, right? And
It's a great analogy.
yeah, so I used to think, right, like, well, this is me up here, right in the head, this little gray matter, that's me, and this is the vehicle that carries me around all day, right, and like gets me food and stuff like that. But that's not accurate, right? It's I'm a holistic person, and my foot is no more, my mind is no more who I am than my foot is who I am, or my spleen is who I am, right? Like, I have a mind, I am not a mind. So to answer your question, it involves silencing your mind, right? Because your mind is good for certain things, right? When you have multiplication problem, your mind, you have an analytical
So
problem
that's
to
a good,
solve.
I think of Alan Watts when you say that. It's like, how do you silence the mind? Because the second you try to
Yeah.
silence the mind, it's like saying, okay, I'm going to go to sleep now. I'm going to force myself to go to sleep. But the things that are really enjoyable is the process of surrender. So how
Yeah.
does one get to that place? How does one let go?
I mean, I did it through meditation, just repetitive practice, and you sit down to meditate, and the thought pops up, and as soon as you realize that you're lost in that thought and you're engaged with that thought, be grateful for having that awareness. Don't beat yourself up for it,
Yeah.
right? Oh, I'm so bad at meditating, right? I'm just never
Yeah.
that's not the way to do it. Say, oh wow, I'm grateful that I am now aware that I am lost in this thought, and I can let it go, right? So ideally, when I'm meditating, right, unless I'm focusing on something specific, I like to think of these thoughts as just little clouds in the sky that are
Yeah.
floating on by, right? You see the cloud, you observe it for a moment, and it floats by, and then it leaves your subconscious, right? And this is something that took me, years to practice.
Sure.
And but that's how I've been able to sort of tap into this higher intelligence. You want to call it God, you want to call it the universe, or some other term for it, right? You can call it whatever you want, but it's by silencing the mind, and just sort of doing what you do without thinking about it, right? Stop thinking so much. Use your mind as the analytical tool that it is, right? It's great to look at the past and learn lessons from the past, right? That's the mind is very good at that, but there's no sense in living in the past, right? So
Yeah.
if you're going to look at the past, be intentional about it, think about it, right? Analyze what happened, what could you have done better, or what went well, right? Like if you're writing a mission report, this is something David Goggins talks about.
Love
It
it.
can't hurt me if you ever read that book, right? He talks
Yeah,
about
it's
doing
fantastic.
like the mission report after something happens, right? That's a good use of your mind, right? You don't have to just ignore it, look at it, learn from it, but then put it aside, right? Put it in the folder, put it on the shelf, and just leave it there, because you can't live in the past. And the same thing with the future, right? It's great to prepare for the future and think about how you want the future to go, and what set goals and things like that, right? But you don't want to live in the future, because then you're kind of living in the dream. You can only live here now in the moment, right? What time is it? It's always the same time. It's always right now. So being intentional about the past and the future, understanding that your mind is very limited insofar as it can only understand the world through the lens of the past, right? So
Yeah.
it can only draw upon past experiences that it's had, right? That this is how our minds work. So if you've had a lot of negative experiences in your life, then your mind is going to expect negative experiences, because your mind can only understand the future and the present through the lens of the past. If you've had a lot of great experiences, then your mind is going to come to expect great experiences. So these have been really kind of key concepts for me to just kind of understand, but it just involves silencing the mind and letting go, right? Just like right now, I don't know where the words I'm saying to you are coming from.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just flowing, right? And what I would say is, I'm connected to some sort of higher intelligence, right? This isn't my brain's not figuring out what to say, right? This is just kind of flowing
Yeah.
through me, right? It's something I'm connected to. It's more that I'm a great analogy, and it's escaping me where it's from one of Frederick Dodson's books, which I don't know if you've ever
I'm not
encountered
familiar with him now.
any of his books, but he has some really great books. One of which I recommend everyone read about is called Levels of Energy. And I know we're planning on talking about David Hawkins a bit
Yeah.
later, but so he has a similar energy scale to Hawkins. It's a little bit different, but in his book, Levels of Energy, he writes the entire book basically is just about energy levels and these different things. And he's a really interesting thinker, but he compares, you're like a TV set, right? When you're watching TV,
Your signal.
the actors aren't in the box showing you this. Your TV is tuning into something that's being broadcast, right?
Yeah.
In the air, we'll say. And then if you want to change that, you guys got to change the channel. You don't go down to the TV studio and say,
Yeah.
hey, I don't like this show, put a different show on. You just change the channel. So thinking about myself like that, and my mind like that has really kind of been transformative for me, and it takes all the pressure off, because I don't have to put any pressure on myself. I just have to kind of do what I feel like, and just this is what they talk about when they talk about like a flow state, for example, is you're just in flow, and it's flowing, you're not thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I actually just put a video yesterday or a couple days ago about like I feel like there's two types of emotions. And I think one is when you're in flow, you have that emotion where you feel good. That's where, on the scale of consciousness, you have joy, you have these feeling willingness to do things. It just flows and it's a good feeling. And then there's the negative feelings, which are, you, as we talked earlier, it's you have to go through the feelings, otherwise you live in the feelings and then it keeps coming up. And the negative feelings you have to feel fully to go through them. But a lot of people identify with those negative feelings. And then this is where I think we have the false mantra that it's just like, it's okay to express your emotions, when in reality they're saying live in the emotions. And now other people invite other people to just live there. Misery loves company is an example of this. So, to me, that's the ultimate, is to get into that flow state. And that's the ultimate feeling, right?
Yeah.
Because then it's not identifying with certain feelings or fleeting feelings of happiness. Happiness it comes and it goes.
Yeah.
But you mentioned David Goggins, so that's two Davids that have been hugely influential in my life. David Goggins, for just like get up and do it, just do it. Stop focusing on the past, future, just do it. And his story is incredible. Definitely recommend for people who haven't seen that. But shifting gears to David Hawkins, you had mentioned briefly it's like passing of the clouds, the thoughts of the passing of the clouds. And he has something remarkable in there that I think it was actually in a video, a YouTube video, where he talks about when people take drugs, or, in my case, porn, your case, food, when people are taking those, it may make those clouds go away temporarily. And then we have those feelings where we're at peace temporarily, but then those clouds come back. And it's a process of watching those clouds. But when those clouds are taken away, the sun is shining through. But the sun is always shining through. It's just our blocks that are stopping us from seeing it. So maybe if you can, I have here on your Twitter, I want to share it as well. You posted this not too far back. This is the scale of consciousness. There's a bunch of different ones out there. You see it on your end?
Yep.
Yeah. So maybe if you could just talk a little bit about this and how this is, impacted your life, and, maybe, your interpretation of levels of consciousness and studying his work.
Yeah, for sure. What I would say really I started with, and there is I found somewhere online an emotion wheel, and it was just like a colorful wheel, and it just had like different emotions, like in different colors. And I saw that one day and it just clicked for me. And I was like, oh, wow. Like I never, like, sometimes I feel these things, right? Because I was really disconnected from my body and how I felt. I was obese, right? And when you're fat and you disconnect from your body, because it doesn't feel good to be connected to your body, right? It hurts, you feel uncomfortable. So I was disconnected from all these emotions, and I wasn't even really aware that I was feeling these things, but I was still carrying them around all day. So
This here, the emotion wheel?
Yeah, basically. So I just saw that the one day, and I was like, wow, like that unlocked a lot for me. I was like, okay, now I kind of understand how this works. And then when you want to evolve it to like the scale of consciousness that Hawkins has, and again, it's a very similar one that Dodson has. This is a model based upon, from what Dodson said. This is how like ancient Indians, in India, kind of came to understand the world. So this isn't just stuff that like modern day kind of scholars and spiritual people have thought of. These have been things that have been understood by humans for thousands of years to a certain extent, right? So if you get down to the bottom, right, and you look at those low levels, right, that's where you find I found myself in those levels. But again, kind of like the fish in the water, I didn't realize I was in a state of shame. I didn't realize I was in a state of guilt, right? You didn't realize I was in a state of apathy. And these are terrible states to be in, because there's no energy in these states, right? So life is really all about energy. So if you're in those low states, there's no energy in those states, and that's why life gets so hard. That's why it feels so hard to lose the weight and go to the gym, because you're in these low states and there's no energy in these low states. But as you kind of climb the scale, there gets to be more and more energy, and it's actually a logarithmic scale. So as you climb it, right, the levels get exponentially higher. So as you go up on the scale, even small increases of energy end up being a lot greater than they are at the bottom. But it can be hard to drag yourself out of these states. Usually people have a range that they're in, right? So it's not like you walk around all day feeling shameful, right? Your energy may rise to
Yeah.
desire or maybe anger at some times, right? So you walk around shameful some of the times, but then something will pop in your head and you're like, oh yeah, I want that, right? And then maybe you get angry that you don't have that. Well, there's more energy in that state of anger than there is in the state of shame or apathy, right? Where you just don't care.
Yeah, really.
But
While you're there,
yeah,
let's say someone who's overweight, right? Is that a tool? Because if you come out to someone who's overweight, you say, you know what, life is so much more. There's so much more power. You can be in peace and love and joy. It's just like, okay, I just want to look sexy,
yeah,
to have some sort. So maybe is that a tool, like using desire or anger at previous self as a tool? Then once they get there, then there's more power, and then you can point them at a higher, place, as opposed to just saying go into peace and love and
yeah.
joy, where it's not going to be received.
100%, and you can only climb the scale so much, right?
Yeah.
And it can be challenging to make even small increases. Most people don't really change their energy significantly in their lifetimes, but I'm proof that it's possible, and
Yeah,
Hawkins talks about
absolutely.
how it's possible, right? But when you talk about someone like a David Goggins, I don't want to be overly critical of him. I have nothing but respect for
For
him,
sure.
but I would still say that there's a lot of anger, right? He has a lot of anger energy even to this
Sure.
day. If you listen to the way he talks, right, there's a lot of anger in it. He's not out there running in states of joy and love and peace when he's given his Instagram, videos. He's
Yeah.
usually in a state of anger at that point, right? But so if you're in a state of guilt, feeling bad about how your life has gone, right, and then maybe you get mad at yourself about it. Well, okay, now there's more energy in the state of anger than there is in the state of guilt, because now you have some energy. So okay, you're mad at yourself, right? Don't get mad at other people for it. Get mad at yourself for it, and now you can use some of this energy in order to help turn your things around, right?
Yeah.
Pride is another good example. It's the highest low state, right? So pride's not necessarily a great state to be in, but at least you feel good. You're at least putting yourself out there. When you're shameful, you want to hide. And I would walk around wearing a big old black quarter zip stretchy pullover, right? And I'd be like, well, I'll just hide from the world, right?
Yeah.
No one can tell I'm fat. Well, that's absurd, obviously, right? But once you start to take some pride in your appearance, right? Well, now there's more energy in that state, right? So, it works out to be courage. Courage is the step forward, basically. Level 200, right?
Yeah.
Courage, we'll say, and
And that's where you're
once,
entering that power stage, right? As opposed to
yep.
force. And that's where it's like you're breaking the surface, and now it becomes easier, right?
Yeah. So I talk a lot about stepping out of your comfort zone, right? And that's really one of the keys to kind of getting forward and moving forward. But when you step out of your comfort zone, right, that takes courage. You have to you have to do something that you've never done before in order to step
Yeah.
out of your comfort zone. If you feel comfortable doing it, then you're still in your comfort zone. But the great thing is we've all stepped out of our comfort zone with so many things in our life, right? So we can draw upon these positive experiences, right? If you've learned to drive, for example, you learned to tie your shoes, right? You went to school, you graduated from school, you got a job, you went through your first day at your job or whatever, right? You've shown courage, you've gotten out of your comfort zone. So it's a question of just looking back at those experiences and seeing them as positives, right? Maybe your first day at work went terribly, but you still did it, right? And
Yeah.
that you showed courage. You were in a state of courage doing it. Because if you were in a state of apathy or shame, you would have just been like, oh, don't even bother. I'm not even going to show up for my first day, right? So once you start to get in a habitual state of courage, once that kind of becomes your chronic state, right, as opposed to these lower states, then you can kind of ascend the scale, and you start to open yourself up to new experiences. You're at a much higher energy level, and you're able to do these things, right? Like I'll often say, the biggest thing I did, one of the biggest things I ever did was getting to the starting line of my first triathlon. It wasn't even finishing the race. It was just lining up to start the race, right? Because that took courage, right? I couldn't control what happened while I was out there on the race course, right? And at one point in time, I thought I might even be disqualified out there, right? And if that happened, then so be it, right? But the real victory was just starting the race. That was the courage, because that was something I'd never done before, and it scared me to do it, right? But I did it anyway. So now doing triathlons is well within my comfort zone, you know. So it's a question of just kind of expanding your comfort zone, but not so much that it's overwhelming, right? Because that gets hard, right? And you know, no one wants to be so far out of their comfort zone that it's scary or whatever.
Yeah, and I think if you're slingshotting up, at least for me, there's times where I beat myself up and I'm like, I got to do all this stuff. Well, then there's that pushback that comes down. So it's kind of like waves in waves. You know, it's a slow progression.
Building, you got to build upon it, right? And you know, everybody's had moments where they've been very high up on the scale, and this is what's appealing about these high levels of energy for people, right? Is it's, you know, like you get a taste of it, you know, and maybe you're a big sports fan, and when your team wins a championship, right, and you get a taste of really high energy, you know, or you have an orgasm, right? And that's really high energy. You know, it's fleeting. You talked about like drug use, for example, and Hawkins kind of explains that drugs don't actually elevate your state; they just kind of suppress some of
that they calibrate at 90, but they give the experience of being higher.
They suppress some of the low energy, so you're able to tap into this higher energy that's always within you. But it's not an authentic change, because once the drug wears off, right, you end up going back down or even below that state, right? But from looking at it like this, you understand why something like heroin is so appealing for somebody, right? Somebody who's in a low state, right? You're very low energy, and you take this drug and it elevates you crazy high on the energy scale into the 500s, the 600s, right? Like, from what I understand, I've never done it, right? But and then you fall back down to the level you're at, and it's got to be hard to just go back to that. You can't just go back to that when you now access this higher state, right? But you didn't do it authentically. But you know, this is part of the reason why it's so addicting. And you say, okay, well, now I want to do it again and again and again, right? So you know, these external things can bring us elevated states, but it's never going to stick, right? You can buy a new car and you're going to feel great for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, but eventually it stops making you feel good anymore. And it just becomes kind of what you're used to, because you're never going to find, you know, satisfaction. You're never going to tap into these states of joy and unconditional love that's in all of us. You're never going to get that from an external source, and it's never going to be a lasting change, you know. So that's why it has to come from within, and it can't be things from outside of you, even other people, right? It can't be your loved ones, your family, right? It has to be from within.
Yeah, you posted a video not too long ago. I think you were still in Jersey at the time. Where just I think you were talking about like that external validation, and I put up a bunch of stuff on that, like the need, and I still notice like pieces of that within me, you know, and it's just like, okay, I want that attention. I think maybe if we can dive into this a little bit, I think, because I feel like when people say I don't need any attention, would you say that? Because I've grown into, I was going through that phase, but I'm like, no, I do like it, attention. I like validation, but is the validation coming from a real validation? Because it's, to me, I love being complimented, but not from a place where it's like, it's my ego. And I can tell the difference now. Like when people give me a compliment from flow state, it's like, wow, that was such a genuine thing. That was, I was receiving something that was real, versus like, I need that external validation, but it feels good to receive, right? But it's not, does that make sense? Like,
yeah, and I think that, you know, we have an ego for a reason, right? It's a tool for us, you know, and you know, to kind of look at it, to zoom out and look at it from a kind of macro level, right? When you meditate and you're watching the thoughts of the clouds go by, you realize that, you know, you're not those thoughts. You're the person, you're the observer, right? So whoever you are isn't, you know, having those thoughts. You're kind of behind that, right? So you have these tools, then your ego is a tool that we're here on earth for some purpose, right? And you know, in order to be here on earth, we have to survive on the planet, right? And this can involve a lot of these lower energies, right? Because we have to do what we need to do in order to survive on this earth, and we have this ego, and this is what fuels us to survive on the earth, and get our food. And so yeah, it feels good. We want to feel good about ourselves, because if we don't feel like we're included, we're not respected, we're not part of the group, right? There's a deep-seated deep-seated feeling that we're going to just be excluded from the group. And for our ancestors, that would have meant death, right? Because you didn't have a group to be with, right? And you would have just kind of been shunned.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to treat your ego carefully and properly, right? It shouldn't just be something that you just ignore completely, because functioning as a human being on planet Earth, you need that for certain things. But again, it's a tool, just like everything else is, right? So when it's serving you and it's serving your purpose and your mission, then it's great and it can be helpful, but when it's not, then leave it aside, and understand on a deep level that you are not that person, right? That's a tool you have. It's a perspective in your mind, maybe, or whatever. But everybody has an ego deep down inside, and it's a balance kind of between the two. I don't think anybody just kind of exists in a flow state 24/7.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's possible to do that, because eventually you're gonna want to eat, and whatever, right? And like, you might see somebody driving a nicer car than you and be like, man, I wish I had that car, right? And
Yeah.
I don't care how elevated you are or whatever, right? These are normal human feelings, normal human emotions. So it's more a question about how do you manage them, how what's your level of awareness when these are coming up, and
Yeah.
then are you identified with it, right? Or is it something that just kind of floats by and says, hey, maybe you want that car, great, well then set it as a goal and figure out how to get it,
With the awareness behind it that I'm okay without it.
yeah,
Right. So that's the
yeah,
whole game.
that hey, this car is not going to make me happy, right? I in a couple of years I plan to be driving a Porsche 911 Turbo, but I realize that it's not going to make me happy, right? And
Yeah.
it's not going to be me, right? It's just a car at the end of the day. It's going to do the same thing that my car does. But hey, who doesn't want a nicer car, right? Who doesn't want a safer car? Who doesn't want to live in a nicer place? I've just moved down here to Florida, and this apartment in a lot of ways is a lot better than where we were living in New Jersey. There's more storage, right? There's a lot of stuff here that we didn't have. There's more counter space. It's nice to have that, Yeah, I function fine without it, but it's nice to have nice things too, and is some of that my ego? Probably, right? But it's just about finding a healthy balance, I think, between the two.
Yeah. No, I agree. Absolutely. The awareness for sure. So changing gears a little bit, I wanted to talk about a post that you put out, 36 things I wish I knew when I was fat, because, people who are watching, I think that in order to relate, when they see you're in this healthy state. I showed the before and after pictures at the beginning, like to see that transformation. To me, someone watches this, they say, you know what, inspired, I can do this. If he can do it, I can do it. That is so cool. But again, going back to the thought patterns, that are there, if you don't mind, I'm going to go through this with me here. And then we can just explain what you mean by each of these. So just, you can see it on your end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 36 things I wish I knew when I was fat. I don't have to be perfect all the time. I can lose fat being very good most of the time. So if you could just go through these here and then just kind of discuss them. You don't have to go through every single one, but I thought they would be very helpful.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, the first one, it's you don't, a lot of people, I think, identify with the trait of perfectionism. And, that's a terrible trait to have. It's seen as many as a positive, but it's not a positive at all, because you're never going to be perfect, and the things you do are never going to be perfect. So it's okay to have that as an ideal, but you have to be healthy about, when you fall short of it, which is going to be almost all the time, if not all the time, right? How do you respond to that? And I have a great quote from Vince Lombardi up on my board here, and the gist of it basically is, we're going to pursue perfection and we're going to fall short of it, but in the end we're going to catch excellence, right? So, when you're trying to lose fat, you don't have to be perfect all the time. You can have it's the old 80-20 rule, right? Now, I might say for fat loss, if you want to do it well, maybe it's a 95-5 rule, right? But still, you're not going to be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
And that's okay. If you slip up, if you forget something, if you have a moment of weakness, don't beat yourself up over it. If you're in a low state, the worst thing you can do is beat yourself up. You need to love yourself, not hate yourself, right? When you're in that state. So just learn the lesson from it and move on and do better the next time. Number two, I'd say walking is the best form of exercise, and that kind of ties into trying to run the weight off is a bad idea.
Yeah.
I would say my journey really kind of started most recently when I got a Fitbit for Christmas in 2013. And then I ended up walking 10,000 steps every day for 7.5 years.
Yeah, done
right?
plenty of those competitions.
Yeah, so I just had a Fitbit, and 2 weeks into it, I fell short of my steps one day, and I felt really bad about myself. And I'm like, man, I'm fat, I'm out of shape, I drink too much, I don't take care of myself at all. Getting 10,000 steps is not that big a deal. I'm outside walking for an hour, it's nice, right? And I couldn't even do it that day. So, it upsets me, so then I said, you know what, I'm going to at least get 10,000 steps every day. And I did it for 2.5 years before I even started losing any weight, because diet's more important than exercise with that, but it definitely helped me on my journey. And then, if you try to run when you're overweight, it sucks, right? Your joints hurt. You're not going to be very good at it. It's the worst way to lose weight. That's not how to do it. Walk, strength train. That's how you want to do that. The next few are kind of about macronutrients, right? A lot of people are low carb zealots. It works for some people. But I've lost 75 pounds 3 times, and I've ate carbs each and every one of the days that I did it. So I think people can eat carbs, and you don't have to be zero with carbohydrates. But when it comes down to it, fat and protein are going to be more important for you, especially if you're trying to restrict your calories, than carbohydrates are. So it does make sense to cut down on carbohydrates, especially if they're junk food or highly processed carbohydrates and those sort of things. But if you're going to eat some fruit or something like that, and it fits into your calorie budget, great, eat it. It's not going to be the end of the world, but protein and fat are going to be more satiating. They're going to provide more nutritious benefits for yourself and your body in a weight loss phase. So, I definitely recommend, cutting down on the carbs, but you don't have to be zero carbs or anything like that. But again, it does work for some people. So if it works for you, great, do it, right? This is an art and a science. It's going to be a blend. Knowledge is useless if not applied consistently. Well, that goes back to me in my 20s. I taught myself how to do all this stuff, right? I knew it. I don't want to say I knew everything about it, but I knew how to lose weight. I knew about fitness, nutrition, but I didn't apply it anymore. And that was one of my big failings was, I had the knowledge, but I just assumed that just because I knew these things, I was going to change my behavior patterns. And I didn't change my self-image. So I started behaving like I did in the past. So
knowledge is potential power. That always stood out when I heard that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great way of putting it. I'll skip down to environment matters a lot. This is another one, right? The people you're surrounded by, the environment, the physical environment that you find yourself in, this is really important. This is another reason for my, factor in my failure in my 20s, to gain the weight back again, is because the people I was surrounded by, my coworkers and my supposed friends at the time, weren't supportive of me and my goals. They were, I would say, envious of me, right? And envy is a terrible emotion. To bring it back to the energy level scale, but people don't want to admit they're envious because it's uncomfortable to admit someone else has something that you don't have.
Yeah.
So it's usually projected onto somebody else's anger or resentment or some other toxic emotion. And I let those people get to me, and I let them kind of convince me that I wasn't worthy. So the people you're surrounded by are important. If you're not surrounded by supportive people, then block out the unsupportive people. Try to surround yourself with supportive people. Using your social media feed for that is a great way to do it, because you can follow supportive people. You can build connections with people on social media who will support you, right? So that's a little tip right there. Obviously, your physical environment matters too. If you have a bunch of junk food in the house, you're going to be a lot more likely to eat junk food than if you don't. If your coworkers are always bringing cookies and cakes into work, right, you're going to need a bit more willpower to avoid those things. Number 14, I think, is a big one, with suppressed and repressed emotions were driving my behavior. And that kind of ties into what we were talking about as well, right? I had all these negative feelings that, I had kind of buried in me. And that was what was driving my behavior. And what I would say to somebody is understand that emotions are what's driving your behavior. And if you don't think emotions are driving your behavior at all, then I can guarantee you that emotions are driving your behavior almost all the time, right? Because you're just not in tune with
Yep.
them and you don't understand that. So if you think that your analytical brain is coming up with everything you're doing, you're way off. You're
Yeah.
missing the boat altogether. Um, the maintaining fat loss, number 15, what I'll say is, I had that plan to say, hey, if I just keep tracking my food and keep exercising and keep weighing myself, well, how am I going to gain weight again, right? Because if I could do that to lose weight, I could do that to maintain my weight. And that worked very well for me for a number of years until I was able to evolve my self-image. um let's see what else is a good one here. The 21, I'd say, don't try to change everything at once. Develop one or two habits at a
Yeah,
time and
that's
build,
huge.
right? This is stepping out of your comfort zone, but in a manageable way. I think we've all tried to just become a different person overnight, right? And you might have a complicated list of, okay, I'm going to eat all this new food. I'm going to go to the gym, 4 times a week, and I'm going to do all this different stuff that I've been doing, right? Because I know this is a healthy way to live, and it's overwhelming for you. You can't do it, especially if you're in a low energy state. You don't have the energy to make all these changes. So what I would say is develop the 1 or 2 habits at a time. For me, it was walking. I did that for 2.5 years, right? And then it was kind of, tracking my food, tracking my calories. Eventually I worked in some weightlifting. I had a lot of other problems though. I wanted to find a new job, but I didn't have the energy for it. And I said, I need to focus on getting healthy first. And then once I did, I got a new job, right? Um, Sun exposure, I'll say number 23, is crucial. The sun is our best energy source. This is really at the thrust of why I wanted to live in Florida.
Yeah.
It's the sun exposure. Getting out in the morning sun, getting out, some sunlight before sunset, setting your circadian rhythm and having great circadian biology is going to be extremely important. So that comes with sun exposure. That's what sets your body's internal clocks. So doing that is crucial to health because that has a cascading effect on you in all sorts of ways in your health. And then to tie into that, right, all the blue light we're exposed to, all the overhead lighting, all the screens that we stare at all day. If you're staring at them before you're going to bed, you're going to have a hard time
Actually, while
sleeping.
we're on that, if we could just
Yeah,
talk about a few things, because I've seen you post other stuff. I mean, I saw that you tagged Grimwood, you talk about
yeah.
magnesium. While we're on the sun exposure, if we could just really maybe talk about some of the things you do on top of that. I think sun is really important. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
talk about like lotion, because I know there's a lot of controversy of that, like on Twitter. And I think, at least from my experience, what I'm learning is that it's gradual sun exposure, right, rather than all these chemicals. And I have a tweet here too from you where you said the U.S. spent 532 billion on pharmaceuticals in 2020. Your immune system is worth much more than this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So maybe if you could just share on that point on number 23, like what are some
Yeah.
natural things people could do?
Sure. Well, look, I mean, I've been down in Florida now for about 3 weeks, right? And you can see I don't really have much of a sunburn. Haven't worn sunscreen a single time. I've only, I've only worn sunglasses when I'm driving right into the rising sun.
Yeah,
Obviously, getting in a car accident is going to be worse, right, than this. So,
sure.
it's about levels and stuff. And I'm wearing mirrored goggles when I'm swimming in the ocean and stuff like that. These are some practicality there, but getting the sun on your skin, in your eyes, is crucial because I've come to understand that vision is a secondary purpose of our eyes. The primary purpose is as solar energy receptors, right? So I urge everybody, who has maybe an understanding of quantum physics to look into quantum biology a bit, because this is kind of where the rubber meets the road in our bodies. And it's all down to the flow of electrons, right? And getting this energy from the sun, your body makes the chemicals you need. It makes the chemistry in your body that you need when your circadian rhythm is on point. So, I avoid sunscreen. If I am going to wear it, I'll wear the mineral sunscreen, right? With the zinc in it, it doesn't really absorb
Yeah.
well, but what I've done since I've been down here is I get a lot of sun exposure early in the morning and I'll get it late in the afternoon, but I'm avoiding sitting out in the midday sun. I
Yeah.
know if after we're done talking, I drive down to Miami Beach and I sit out in the sun for 3 hours without any sunscreen, without a shirt on, I'm going to get a bad sunburn, right? Because there's a lot of energy coming from the sun, but what happens is if your body can't process all that energy, you end up getting inflammation, right? That sunburn, and that's why the sun can be damaging. So it's like anything else, you need the right dose of it. And getting gradual exposure definitely helps. You build, what they say is your solar callus, and that is helpful. You want to make sure you're not getting too much sun, just the same way you want to make sure you're not getting too much anything.
Yeah.
So that's been key for me. And having the circadian rhythm fixed, avoiding screens after dark. I wear the UVX glasses that block all the blue light after sunset, right? Because the blue light from the screens and from the terrible indoor lights that we have now, they have a lot of blue light in it, and your brain, your eyes think it's solar noon, right? That has the characteristics of light at noon. So it's no wonder you can't fall asleep if you're staring at midday sun all night, right? And then you just put your phone off and roll over and you can't sleep. Well, no, of course you can't sleep because you've been staring at the sun the whole day. Your body thinks it's noon, right? How could you sleep? So we are in these environments. They are artificially created environments. We've built all this infrastructure, right? They didn't have artificial lighting until the 1870s, I think, So these have all been created by humans in recent times. This is at the cause of so many of these degenerative diseases that we see now in people at earlier and earlier ages, right? It has to do with this circadian biology and just the terrible light environments that most people find themselves in all day long. So, doing what you can to manage that is crucial for fat loss and just overall health in general. Let's see what else we've touched on. We've touched on a bit of these already here.
Maybe go into journaling. Yeah,
journaling. Yeah, so I talked about that a little bit, right? And a lot of people don't know what to write. That's the biggest question I get when I tell people to journal. Is I don't know what to write. So the way I did it was I just set a timer for 5 minutes at first, and I said, all right, I'm just gonna set this for 5 minutes, and I'm just gonna write for 5 minutes. And I did it at my desk at work even at first, right? So I'm getting paid for it. So I'll just sit here for 5 minutes. I'm just gonna write down whatever comes to mind, even if it's journaling's stupid, I don't have anything to write, I'll just write that down. Because for me, it's kind of a brain dump, right? It's not a diary or whatever. I don't expect anybody to ever read it again. I don't really ever read it again. My handwriting probably isn't legible enough for me to read it anyway. But it's about just getting these thoughts out, these big complex thoughts that are too much for us to hold in mind. You can only hold so much in your mind at one time, but by speaking it or by writing it, you can get this out. It can be really cathartic in a way, and just journaling about the past can be helpful. Like I said, and about framing these events from different perspectives, right? Being kind to yourself about it. It's really helped me kind of let it go. Something I'll do is if I get a good journal topic, I'll just write it down. If I'm not in a place where I want to journal right now, I'll just write it down on an index card and I'll stick it in my journal. So the next time I sit down, I say, oh, okay, here's a topic. I can write about this, right? So for me, it's just about writing. Some people do it more structured, or whatever. That can work too. Courtney and I actually, we have a gratitude journal where every night we write down 3 great things from that day, so that's a very helpful thing as well.
Yeah.
So journaling is great. I'll say the SMART goals. If you've ever worked in a corporate environment, you've probably heard of this. If you haven't, you can Google it. There's a lot out there, but SMART is specific, measurable, achievable, relative, and time bound is the T, right? So if you're setting a goal, it needs to be specific, it needs to be measurable, it needs to be achievable, it needs to be relevant, and it needs to be time bound, because these are the things that make it a goal. Because how else can you track your progress to it, right? If it's not specific, right? If your goal is just, I want to be rich, well, that's a dream. That's not a goal, right?
Yeah.
But if you set down something that's specific, that's measurable, right? And, so you can actually, begin to build a plan to reach this goal, right? And take the goal in the distance and break it down into smaller pieces and break those down to smaller pieces and break those down into daily actions and break those down into what you're going to do at this moment, right? In order to get closer to that goal. So, that's a great kind of way to frame these goals. And then, I would say 36, raising my energy is the most important thing that I did. And that ties back to talking about Hawkins and the
Yeah,
energy
big
level
time.
scale, right? Emotions are energy. These two terms should be thought of to be kind of interchangeable in a way.
And if you
So
wanted to go into 35 too, because I like that. Don't let
yeah,
the crabs pull me back into the buckets. Find myself
yeah,
in
sure.
supportive people where I can't tune in. But what I would say is like, because sometimes it's really important to get the constructive criticism, right? So maybe if you can dive into how do you filter that out as far as, because if somebody criticizes me and I'm in that state of power growing into that, I can receive that criticism and then I can decipher whether, okay, this person's just hating because they have some insecurity within them, or, they're giving me positive, negative feedback, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that ties into what I was talking about a bit with my coworkers not being supportive, right? They're just the crabs in the bucket. They're just
Yeah.
projecting onto you the negativity that they feel about themselves. It has nothing to do with you when this is happening, right? They may be critical of you, but it's nothing to do with you. It's about them and really what they feel about themselves.
Yeah.
And dealing with criticism is hard. I think it's hard for everybody. Nobody likes to be criticized. I get a lot of hate on Twitter, right? And I find it kind of surprising. I don't really talk about controversial things for the most part. I try to keep it upbeat and positive, right? And it's been hard for me because as growing up, I hated to be criticized,
Yeah.
so and the negative comments stand out a lot more than the positive ones do. And for somebody, even with some awareness like myself, that's still the case. It's I know how this works. I know it's just somebody projecting this onto me. I know it's not meant personally against me, but it's still what I think about. It's still what keeps popping up in my head, on some level, right? The 100 positive comments I got, those don't pop
Yeah.
up, right? We're wired to be in tune with this negativity. So having the awareness of it's great, but sometimes just because you know how to let something go, then if you read Hawkins' book, if you read Letting Go, you'll learn that letting go of negative emotions can be astonishingly simple, right? It's just about feeling the feeling fully and surrendering to it or letting go of it. But that doesn't mean it's just going to go away forever, right? You might have some stuff that just keep coming up and keep coming up over and over and over again. You just have to keep going through the process, keep letting it go. I mean, he talks in the book about some things taking weeks sometimes to let go of, and this is just the way it works.
Yeah, and for me, it's really been it's a somewhat painful process because, and I attribute it to some of what like Jordan Peterson talks about. It's like a burning off dead wood, right? So it's a process of being aware with those thoughts, but at the same time, there's a part of me that's dying, right? It's, to me, it's like a rebirth. It's a dying of these, when those inadequate thoughts come up, it's like, no, that's not really who I am. But on a certain level, being programmed from all the negativity in the world, that seems almost normal,
Yeah.
right? So I would say that I've really been able to trust, say, oh no, it's okay to feel these negative. This is the old dying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that as you rise up in that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm seeing that the more that I'm in those present states, it's like it becomes a catalyst to stay more into those present states, because anytime I'm bringing my focus away from that present moment, I notice it very quickly. So it's like it becomes a state of being all the time, but you fall off, like you said,
Yeah.
it's a growing into, but then I notice, wow, this can really screw up the whole day if you just start that, like you said, you're doing the three things that you're grateful for at night.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, because that starts the next day, like, oh, okay, we're in a state of gratitude. And then
Yeah.
anytime you catch yourself with that negative, it's like, wow, it really has a big impact, those
Yeah.
thoughts.
It ties into your self-image and your comfort zone too. So if you've seen yourself a certain way for your whole life, then you're comfortable seeing yourself that way, right?
Yeah.
it doesn't matter that it's a bad state, you might feel bad. This is what you know, this is what's comfortable for you. So stepping out of the comfort zone, we'll say being happy, right? This is why people are so drawn to, making these same mistakes again. And just it might seem like they're punishing themselves, right? Like, because this is what feels comfortable. And on a cellular level, our bodies become addicted to this chemistry that's produced at these negative emotions. So change, permanent change can be time consuming. There's some people apparently who could just kind of flick a switch and have it happen overnight, right? But for most people, it's going to take years probably of just, evolving this. And that's kind of a protection mechanism that you have, because again, it's uncomfortable for you. If you wake up as a completely different person, right? Yeah, maybe you feel better, but you don't know what up and down is even, right? Everything is different for you now. So all the kind of signposts in your life, everything that you would say, are things you're comfortable with, right? If all that goes away at once, then what are you left with? You're just kind of in the void, right? And you have to find yourself again. And that's really scary, right? So if you find yourself in that situation, it's going to be normal for you to go back to the place that you were, but that's why it's a gradual process. And that's why it's gradually stepping out of your comfort zone, because as you get a little bit further out of your comfort zone each time, you're going to kind of, start to become familiar with the state. And it's not going to be so scary for you. It's not going to be such an overwhelming change. You'll have some familiarity with the state, and it'll be easier for you to maintain that. And you're going to be less likely than to go back into these negative states that you've been in habitually. But, it can take years, to really make that.
Yeah, that I think it ties into what you're saying with the 36 thread, just really not beating yourself up. You're not going to be perfect. Go for like a little bit more, even 1% better than yesterday is something I commonly hear. And that compounds so much.
Hold yourself accountable, right? But also be compassionate towards yourself, right? And we have to become our best coaches. Doesn't matter how great the coach that you've hired is, right? At the end of the day, it's always going to be down to you and your self-talk and what you're doing in that moment, right? When no one's watching, right? You have to become your own best coach. And you have to understand when you need to, treat yourself with compassion, when you need to, be kind to yourself, but also when you need to hold yourself accountable, right? And say, hey, this is BS. I'm not getting the job done right now. I got to shape up, right?
Yeah.
And but also understanding, why you got there and being compassionate towards yourself, not being negative about it, but just learning, but also keeping it real, right? And there might be situations again where, maybe you fell off and it's okay, right? You don't want to, again, you don't be perfect, right? Say, okay, I understand. I had a bad day. I ate some ice cream, right? I had a beer I didn't want to drink, right? I feel better. It made me feel better in the moment, but that's not, that can't be my chronic state. I understand that. I forgive myself for that. And now I'm going to move forward again, and do that.
Yeah. That word perfect's come up. I wanted to share with you because I really think about, because especially like the Christian culture, I'll say that because I follow Christ. I don't like the Christian culture, religion versus religionism, pushing it on the people and instead of embodying the principles of it. But this idea of perfection, I really think it's a true thing. And let me explain. So the true statement that there is perfection, there's a perfect way of seeing things, whether we're aligned with that or not is different. But we can't be perfect in the eyes of the ego, right? We have to make mistakes. So we're going to have these mistakes, then we learn from them. So from the ego, we're going to have the past, we grow from them, make those mistakes. But there's always a perfect way of seeing it. If we're aligned with that, then we grow into that. That to me is one of the points of life. But that always stuck to me because, especially as of late, because when we say, well, nobody's perfect, when I hear that, there was a part of me that wasn't fully on it. It's like, it gives us a reason to not go towards perfection. And I mean that lightly. I don't mean that like trying to compete with everybody, be the best. And no, be the perfect version of yourself. What would that look like? And grow into it daily, right? Like what would be the perfect version of a seed? Well, a full plant or a tree, right? So is that something that you would agree with? Or
I definitely agree with that, right? Perfection is a great ideal, but again, you have to understand you're not going to reach it probably, and certainly not today. right?
Yeah, it's something to grow into. Yeah.
And here's the thing: if you did reach it today, well, then what, right? So what would the point of life be then? If you woke up tomorrow morning and you're perfect, and your life was perfect,
Well, so
well,
that's why I would say is that the top of that chart is isness, and that's
yeah,
perfect. You accept everything as it is, even your flaws. That is
yeah,
actually a perfect state, which is it becomes a paradox, right? Because
yeah,
you can't achieve perfect to the mind, but you can be in a state of perfection, right? And
yeah.
it comes and goes. So I guess we can end it there. If there's anything you wanted to end it, speak about, and where people can find you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can find me. My biggest platform is Twitter at Matt Izzo, Mattizzo. I'm tweeting on there all day, and I offer personal coaching. So I do kind of holistic coaching. I would say it's more than just here's your diet plan, here's your exercises for the week, right? Because that's not going to cure someone's problem, right? That's not going to anyone can find that. You can Google it and find it. And if solving obesity were that simple, we would not be in the problem that we're in. But I feel very strongly that I had to endure all that I've had to endure, and I've learned what I had to learn for a reason, and my reason is to help others now and help educate them kind of about how to make a more holistic change. So I do that. I'm actually starting a holistic transformation group on May the 9th as well, because there's definitely a lot of power in a group setting, right? In a supportive group, that can be very beneficial. And offer coaching calls, and I also offer tons of free advice. I have a newsletter. I put out information a couple times a week, just, useful tips and just ways of looking at things about fat loss, self-development, and things. I want to help everybody become the best versions of themselves, and by helping other people, I'm helping myself as well, and I feel like I'm fulfilling at least part of my purpose. So I'm on Twitter at Matt Izzo. I'm on Instagram at Matt Izzo Fitness, where I kind of focus more on my athletic endeavors, right? I'm training for Ironman Florida, which is coming up in 205 days.
Yeah, saw the post on the board. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm training for that, which is a lot of fun. There's a lot of people in the Twitter community who are actually doing this race, so it's kind of crazy, because I like challenging myself, and I like doing hard things, and so you can find me there, and if you want to connect with me, I'd love to hear from you, and just reach out, and I'd be more than happy to respond, and see if I can help you, because that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Well, Matt, I really appreciate it. To me, I just want to commend you on the work you're doing. To me, you inspire me to keep doing what I'm doing. And that's the idea. When your cup is full, you can't help but give that to other people, because that's what life is really all about. To me, you're a light in the Twitter community. The things that you're putting out, when I see those positive messages, to me, it's conscious positivity. It's not like fake it till you make it. It's not like this. You're being real, and I think we need more of that. So I appreciate the message that you put out on a daily basis.
Thanks so much for your kind words. I appreciate you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.